Welcome today on our Merill Expert Talk. I'm your host and fund manager at Merill Funds. I've managed portfolios from Geneva, London, and Valletta. We are back to my roots here in Geneva, and I'm delighted to introduce our special guest, Fabien Aepli, lawyers and partner at leading firms here in Switzerland. Before we dive into our conversations, a quick reminder, our usual disclaimer, follow at the end of the program as usual. For more daily insight, don't hesitate to visit our merillfunds.com or connect to our LinkedIn Merill Investors. So let's start our journey. Welcome back to the episode 2. I hope you like the part 1. So now we will continue our journey with Fabien as usual in his office here in Geneva. Thank you. To come out about MiCA, the European regulations, just tell us how you see the things. We know, like in the past, MiFID II had a major impact on the asset manager around Europe. We have been impacted in Malta for sure. Now we know that European regulation is pushing in certain directions and forcing Switzerland also to adapt. So how is your view about MiCA regulations and how you see Switzerland going in the right directions, adopting maybe some regulations coming from MiCA?
MiCA is an interesting topic. The new regulation, it's rather comprehensive, as I've said before, much more comprehensive than rules, provisions, guidelines that we have in Switzerland so far. And if I go through MiCA, when I do this, I see that I can clearly follow. I can see that, for instance, the categories of tokens are to some extent similar to the ones that we have in Switzerland, but it's most of the times this is the case, meaning that it's kind of similar, but it's not quite the same. And usually the evil is in the detail and in the differences. This is making many people's life people that are active in that field a little bit more complicated, because it's very difficult to say that you will comply with some regime, and by doing so you will also cover and be fully compliant with the other regime. It's not necessarily the case. So usually you need to make sure that you are complying with both regimes as soon as they have some implications. And obviously, Switzerland is not part of the EU, but it is also clear that the major piece of regulations and legislation that we have in the European Union play a major role or have major impact in Switzerland. We have examples in the past. You mentioned before MiFID and MiFID II. That's good examples. They had a major influence on the Swiss legislation. We have recent pieces of law with the Financial Institutions and Financial Services Act, which have been clearly impacted by MiFID II. But again, it's not the same. It's not that we replicate or copy-paste what is in the EU. We have never known that, and I'm sure that until I will be on this earth, this is not going to happen. And probably I'm not saying it's bad, probably at least it makes sense, but that's the legislation process, and legislation process is pretty long, especially in Switzerland. This is also the reason why FINMA was able to come with guidelines, because we're not talking about a legal act that will go through the parliament and will take years. I mentioned Financial Institution and Financial Services Act. These two pieces of legislation people tend to forget that, but they took more than 20 years to come out. So it was a very long journey. So given that with MiCA I cannot see Swiss players forgetting about MiCA and say, I don't care, I'm in Switzerland. If you will really be doing business in Switzerland and Switzerland only, so everything will be in Switzerland. Your clients, your relationship, your custodians, your developers, and you do not care about anything outside Switzerland, maybe you can rely on Swiss law only. but it's pretty unlikely that this will happen. So sooner or later, and probably it's sooner rather than later, MiCA will have implications, because as soon as you are acting with some impact on the EU legislation, regulations like MiCA will happen. The same happened before with GDPR, for instance, when it was necessary to cope with that new regulation from Switzerland as soon as you had clients in the EU, for instance. And also, GDPR had a major impact on the new piece of legislation for data protection in Switzerland. That's played an important role. So whether this will happen with MiCA, I'm not aware of the drafting of some major piece of legislation, so I do not think the project is like this for now. I think the discussion should be opened and should be actively open, and in Switzerland should be actually conducted, as to whether we should adjust the legislation and the regulation for digital assets. I think also for this we should not rest too much on what we have achieved thus far, and we should be carefully considering having other pieces of legislation. It can go in the direction of MiCA, it can be different, but we cannot ignore the impact of other players. We've mentioned the EU, we mentioned the US, as you've said, with the authorization regarding ETFs, blockchain, and ETH. This is something that has had a major impact, and some decision that can be taken in the US also by the SEC or some other bodies, they're likely to have also an impact in Switzerland, and we cannot do that. That's part of the game, even though this is not Switzerland.
Thank you, Fabien. It was really, really interesting. Now, just to come back a little bit about you and your entrepreneurial journey, I think it's very important for the audience to know that you have also working as a board member, active in a wealth manager. I think it could be interesting also how your visions and how you have been implementing, because you spoke about be a generalist at the beginning of your career, and knowing often we think the trend at the moment is to be very specialist. Now I think it's interesting to speak about this entrepreneur journey as a board member, and give us a little bit some insight, and how is your day now as a board member.
Thanks for asking, Marc. Yes, I do have some board directorship mandates in my activity. As you remember, I said before, the three pillars I'm basically focusing are corporate law, commercial agreements, and financial regulation. And financial regulation, especially in the fintech field. And given that I've been working with this, I had the opportunity a few years ago to have to be appointed as a director. And this is not a question that go without saying. It's something to be duly considered. Also with regards to lawyer professional rules, because there is another distinction. I told you lawyers like make distinctions, but another important distinction is between typical lawyer activities or attorney activities and non-typical activities. Why this is important is because legal privilege only apply to attorney typical activities. So like going to court, drafting agreements, advising on legal stuff, but clearly not on activities such as being appointed as a board member or not acting as a portfolio managers. I do not see what this has to do with that, but I've seen so many lawyers acting as portfolio managers, maybe a little bit less now, but like 10, 15 years ago, there were many lawyers doing that wide. It's a different business. I don't think we have any say on this. But board directorship can be something different, because it's important to have a board composition that is as complementary as possible meaning you do not want to have all the same experience and expertise and profiles around the table for board meetings. Obviously not, and especially not only lawyers. That would be awful. I would not like to be part of this if there would be only lawyers around the table for a board of directors. But when you have someone coming from the industry and someone coming more from the accounting side, for instance, so you need to, it's a case-by-case thing to have a good composition of profiles around the table of the board. And if it makes sense within this composition to have someone like a lawyer, obviously the three pillars that I've been talking about are very useful in this respect. Corporate law, go without saying, but commercial agreements as well, because this is an important part of things that we are dealing with and that have often a strategic implication or dimension. So we're talking about board matters, basically, and financial regulations, because that's one of the big component of the business strategy when we are talking about players in the finance sector, and including fintech. So this is something that I've been doing. It's not the major part of my activity. I have maybe between 4, depending from time to time, between 4 and 6 board membership mandates. Clearly, I don't want to have too many because it's something that is it's rather cumbersome. You need to do that only if you can add value, if you understand the underlying business, and also given that necessarily you will not be an operational member, you will be a non-executive member of the board. That's obvious, but as a matter of consequence, I only do this when I have a strong trust relationship with the entity, and I know also personally the people who are executive members. This is something that is important. But having that in mind, from an entrepreneur viewpoint, I very much enjoy playing also this role of board memberships and to be active in this field and to participate in the strategy of the developing strategy but people need to understand that if you take someone with a similar profile as mine in the board of directors, it means it's a director that will ask questions that maybe you did not expect, that maybe you did not want to be asked, but that's part of the business. So we really do this seriously. We do that. I would say we do that full speed. We do that with all the implication that is needed, and it's a different approach than mandates that I know from being an attorney, advising clients and so on. But I like to have this duality.
Thank you, Fabien. I'm sure for the audience, they probably want to know more a little bit on what type of activity, asset management, portfolio management, where you have this role as a board member. Just give us a little bit more from a pragmatic approach. What is exactly your role and how you act in this type of board?
In terms of sector of the companies to which I'm a board member, what I can say is that obviously there is my law firm, that is a limited liability company, of which I'm a board member and the chairman. Beside this, I'm a board member of 3 companies which are either asset managers, so manager of collective investment schemes or collective wealth, or portfolio managers. So all them having, we're talking about companies having the license granted by FINMA to perform these activities. And another category which has not much to do with my professional activities, but I'm also a board member or a member of foundation, but that's something that has to do with animal protection, animal welfare. So this is something that I'm doing pro bono, nothing to do with the business. But if you ask about my board memberships, that's one of them or 2 of them. In terms of role, I'm a regular board member. From time to time, if I'm a chairman, I have the role of chairman with all the tasks that are related to that specific role. But otherwise, I'm an ordinary board member with all the duties and rights, obviously using rights of information to look at anything in the company like any other board member. Obviously, we rely on the expertise, the specific expertise of each board member a bit more specifically depending on what we're talking about. For instance, when we're talking about compliance reports, I will most probably have more questions to ask about that, to have some elaborations when something is not fully clear, and I will look into that with maybe a more precise eye than the finance people who will look more at the financial statement.
Thank you very much, Fabien. Is it possible for you to give us a little bit about your personal interests on the protections of the animals? I'm sure the audience will be happy to get your personal touch on that side, and why you have been setting up these foundations, and what's the objective of these foundations.
Yes, happy to say a few words about that. That's usually topics I do not discuss too much when I'm wearing these clothes and in this office, because this is something I'm doing beside my work. But I know I have activities as a volunteer. I'm the chairman of an association which is managing a shelter for animals in the region in Nyon, which is in between Geneva and Lausanne. This is something I've been doing for some years now. And we have also a foundation that is related to that. A new project, a new foundation that is about to be created. It's a matter of a few weeks from now, probably, which has a more international impact, with having some financing in order to select and analyze some project for the animal protection anywhere on Earth. So we can try to have an impact and help something. We have already discussed project, and we are already financing and helping projects in countries like Morocco, Thailand, and only to name a few. So this is starting. This is a cause that obviously is a cause that matters to me. Also because I believe that I'm kind of privileged, having been able to choose what I wanted to study, to work on fields that what we have been talking about, fintech, stuff like that, and working as a lawyer is something that I chose, and I think it's important to give back a little bit sometimes without expecting something in return. Anyway, as soon as you're talking about animals, you get much in return, even though you are not. That's not the reason why you're doing that. But I'm helping as a volunteer in this field and also in the sports field, trying to help a little bit, especially in basketball. That would be my sport. So it's important to have also this kind of activities and really give back when you can. You don't have time for that, but you can take time for that.
Thank you, Fabien, for this personal touch, and I'm sure the audience will appreciate this part. Now, just to conclude here this part 2, I think it's very interesting what we have been discussing. It was an interesting journey, and I'm sure the audience will like it. What has your view going forward for of course, the digital asset, and how you see the regulations to evolve? Obviously in Switzerland, but you have also some opinion about what's going on in Europe, I'm sure.
We need to accept that everything we're talking about, on one hand, it goes crazy fast, and on the other hand, we are really at early stages. So we are still lacking standards, especially, or be it domestic level or be it international. And getting to standards is something that is necessary. We don't have much choice for that. But these standards are taking more time than the technology itself to be in place, and this is starting to come. If you people don't get that, maybe they can also try to remember when it was at the early years of the internet, not the very early years, but I'm talking about mass adoption and will everybody using the internet, and how it was at the beginning, and also was lacking some standards, and how it has evolved in this respect, and some things that we all today consider that to be self-explanatory and obvious, that standards. And this is something that we do not have yet for digital assets. So it's probably coming. I think what has a major potential of evolution is probably the decentralized finance in general. But here also the need for standards is really high. I think that anti-money laundering will always have a major role to play, and is something that always needs. That what I'm also saying to my clients that I'm talking about is something they should not even consider avoiding by having some specific category of tokens or changing a little bit the business model. I think you need to understand that this is part of the game. As soon as you're talking about digital assets and you're talking about clients, my short view on that is that you need to take AML into account and to do everything to make sure that you will be supervised for AML, to make sure that everything will be clear. And something that we have not talked about today, but in terms of technology, how can we mention these innovations without having at least one word for AI? And when I think about blockchain and AI coming together, or what can be the combined impact of these two technologies, it's something that is it's a bit dizzy, but it's really fascinating. And to some extent also, I remember when I was coming back to the internet early days, it was also dizzy to some extent. And then we get used to that. That's part of the journey. And we are probably we are much too young not to be part of it. And let's take the challenge.
So thank you very much. This is the end of the episode 2. It's also the end of all our series. I'm sure you will like it. If you want more, don't hesitate to send message. I mean, Fabien will be happy, I'm sure, to come back on the stage again. So thank you very much for having us here in your office in the center of Geneva. Thank you again, Fabien, for taking time to spend with us, and hopefully see you soon. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you very much, Marc, and see you soon, here or somewhere else, maybe in Malta. Who knows?
Thank you very much, Fabien. See you soon.